Right now, we have a public notice that will go in newspapers and trade journals. I'm doing a nationwide search to find the very best police chief that is out there now that has innovative ideas on current policing techniques, predictive policing, crime prevention, and all of this. So I'll do a nationwide search, recognizing the fact that we have two very, very outstanding, qualified, educated assistant chiefs right here in the city of St. Petersburg, which I'm hopeful that they will both apply for. So I will have a process where we look at all the resumes and we kind of cut that down to maybe 10, and then we can invite some people to come in. I've got a panel that will look at the interviewing process and make a recommendation to me that is primarily of my staff and a member from the law enforcement community, and I'll have a second panel doing interviewing processes as well, which is made up of members from the community. They will make recommendations to me, and then I will make the decision. Somebody that I'm comfortable in with the right management skills, communication skills, but very knowledgeable on all things policing, so we can take this city forward and have certainly the best police department. I think they're outstanding now, but we can always do better, Mr. Kriseman, I agree. Yeah, we can do better. And because you always have that goal. And you really want to be the safest, absolutely the safest city in the United States of Florida. And I'm not going to hire go-getters.
Let me go ahead and dispel the rumor also. No, I'm not going to hire go-getters. Like Mayor Foster, my process would also be to look into a nationwide search. I think one of the areas that he and I may differ on as far as how that search would be conducted is I'd like to have an outside firm that is conducting the search on the city's behalf. I have some concerns about it being done in-house. Last time it was done in-house, if you remember, Matt Grimes was the guy that was running it, and ultimately he said, I know the best person that you should choose. It's me. I don't want to see us back in that kind of position again. I think we do have some opportunities. I'm notably missing, from what I understand, also of the way the mayor's process would be, is the input from city council. Back when the last chief was hired, Mayor Baker sought the opinions out of both Mr. Foster and I when we were on council, along with all the other council members. I think their input is important and valuable, and I think the fact that they're not specifically being included in the process speaks to a larger concern, which might be why 6 of the 8 have endorsed me. But no, I would not be hired at all.
Councilman Newton, City of St. Petersburg. Mayor, first of all, I want to thank you for your service and offering yourself up to make a difference in the city. You and I both were graduates of Northeast High School, class of '81, and both were born and raised in the city. But after 10 years on council and 4 years as mayor, I've been on council approximately 6 years' work with both mayors. My question to you is, why do you think 6 of the current council members that worked with you the last 4 years, and some of them have worked with you in your political career, now endorse new leadership? I just heard you say, we done all this and we done all that. Why is 6 out of 8 of the we not supporting you, sir?
Thank you, Councilmember, for your service as well. We do go way back. I mean, we were in the same graduating class at Northeast High School, so we've known each other a long time. And I think there's a very reasonable answer for that. Because if you look at the makeup of the city council and you look at how some of these votes have gone, there are some on this city council that have had an insatiable appetite to spend your money. And in a system of a bicameral system of a legislature and an executive, there's a checks and a balance system in that. It was my job. I gave you those numbers in my opening just to give you some perspective as to just how difficult this recession was, coupled with a mortgage foreclosure crisis. And yet there are some members on the city council that just wanted to keep spending your money. And at times I was the only one standing between that city council and your checkbook. So if you want people to write checks that you're going to have to cash, you can vote for my opponent. Because they're already supporting some of that. But you know what? We're coming out of this recession, but we have to have a mindset of lowering that millage rate. I mentioned in my opening a competitive tax environment. And that's how you create jobs and small businesses. You incentivize, but it's a tax environment. So we're always going to have to look for efficiencies. We can always do better. But you don't want an executive and a city council that are just going to keep spending your money. That's why there's 6 council members. Well, actually, I thought it was 5. I guess you've already gone over to the other side, council members. Now it's 6. But my commitment to you is I'm going to be tight with your money. And we're still going to assess need versus want, always. But I'm the only one standing between you and your money and that situation. Man, I'm wound up now.
Thank you, me too. Thank you for being here, Kim Black. This question goes to both of you, but specifically Mayor Foster. It seems that Rick Scott has embraced your candidacy. And speaking of money, and public school educators can't be here today because this is at noon, they're in the school. We want to know exactly which education policies you embrace that belong to Rick Scott's governor positions and which policies you do not. And to Rick Kriseman, same question about the policies that you support and which you don't.
Well, let me tell you this. I'm out there trying to create jobs and economic opportunities. It's not my number one focus to go out and collect endorsements. Now, that being said, I'm happy with every endorsement. So, my favorite endorsement comes on, when you fill out your absentee ballot for me, or when you vote on November 5th for me. That's my favorite endorsement. Now, I don't support any cuts to education. I supported the raises for teachers. I think it's somewhat disingenuous to cut and give a raise, but you know what? I admire any executive because he had the same budgetary issues on a state level with deficits and all of that. He's a steward of your money like I am a steward of your money, so he had to make the hard choices. And you don't govern by polling, you govern by molding consensus. And so I think he did a great job, but I think the raises for the teachers were good, as the raises for city employees, I think, were responsible as well with the city of St. Petersburg. Now, with St. Pete's Promise and my role in education, and remember, I've been mayor for a little over 3 years. I've had 3 different superintendents beyond my control. So I inherited Julie Jensen. I had John Stewart. He was wonderful. He was an interim. Dr. Michael Grego, give this man a chance. He is passionate about your children. And he and I talk frequently, and we're constantly thinking of ways that we can partner. I've got a school board city employee 3 doors down from my office right now on working on nothing but initiatives for South County schools. I've got a partnership with the Pinellas Education Foundation, Take Stock in Children. And they're in City Hall as well, 3 doors down, doing nothing but raising money for doorway scholarships, recruitment of corporate partners and mentors. And I have a city employee in that same office, so we've got 3 employees working on nothing but partnerships with education. Because there's nothing more important than we do than the education of your children.
Thank you for that question, Tim. As far as Governor Scott's positions he's taken on education, I haven't agreed with any of them. When I was in the legislature, typically part of the reason I voted against the budget was because there was cuts to funding for education. Money was being shifted out of facilities that would have gone PICO funding that was completely taken out. In fact, I think it was $55 million a year for 3 years that was taken out of money that would have gone to improve our public schools and was diverted into private schools. I could not support that. I do not support that. I still would not. If I was up there today, I'd still be voting no. Senate Bill 6 is another one, and Son of 6. Thankfully, Governor Chris vetoed the original Senate Bill 6. Governor Scott signed it into law. You can go on my website and see me arguing against those bills when I was on the floor. Budgets are about priorities. Mr. Foster talked about tight tight budgets. They're about priorities and what's important. If education is important in the state, if we view it as something that's not just educating our kids, but putting them in a path to success as opposed to jail, educate instead of incarcerate, it's economic development, and we find money. We make it a priority in our budget. And the last thing I'll say, as far as Mayor talked about St. Pete Promise, I'm glad he's doing that. But again, this is an election year program that never existed until it became election year.
Thank you, Representative. Dave Zacco. We have heard a lot from the mayor about how tremendous the financial crisis is in St. Petersburg. The mayor of St. Petersburg has always had a great relationship with the governor, whether it was Baker and Bush, the term that Charlie was in, the $4 million that was brought in for the library between Baker and Bush in South St. Pete, the new market in South St. Pete brought in by, again, Bush and Baker. Which team is going to benefit us the most as far as state grants, federal support? Will it be the Kriseman, Charlie Crist team, or will it be Mayor Foster and the present governor, who we all know very rarely gets here?
An interesting question.
Which team?
Yeah, I think that, first off, and I appreciate you asking that, because you do raise a point, and it's something that my wife said to me the other day. She said, in all the years that we've had elections here in St. Petersburg, everyone who's ever run for mayor has always come traditionally from downtown St. Pete. They either haven't served at all, or they come from city council and they serve in city council. We haven't really ever elected a mayor who's had exposure as an elected official beyond the city level, like I have been working at the state level. And because of that, I think we've never had a mayor who has, with the exception of Baker, and he was unusual, who had reached beyond our borders. A lot of things are about relationships. And I think, given that we have the most unpopular governor in the United States right now, there is certainly a chance that he will not be our governor in 2014. Obviously, if he is, I need to work with him. But I have a good working relationship with members of the legislature, and when it comes to Washington, I have a lot of friends in Washington in different positions, from people in the Obama administration to the governor of Delaware, who's a good friend of mine, to a senator from Delaware, who's a good friend of mine. And it's about relationships. That's how you get things done, unfortunately. It's how you bring money back to the community. Rick Baker was very good at that. And whoever is your mayor, and I hope it's me, will need to continue to have those relationships, not just within our city, but outside our boundaries.
It really is about relationships. And Mr. Kriseman's job in Tallahassee was more than just sitting in his chair and voting no and hitting the no button all the time. It was to represent you, it was to represent his district, and it is about relationships. And Mr. Kriseman couldn't get along with the other party. That's why he didn't get anything done. You don't get to pick and choose who you represent or who you play nice with in the sandbox when you're the mayor. Because you have to be the mayor of all people. So when it comes to my relationship with the existing governor, let me tell you what the Foster Scott team was able to do last year. We secured $5 million for the USF School of Business. And it was on his table, and he was considering my veto, and a lot of smart people involved in this community worked overtime all weekend long to make sure that that passed. And we're going back up in there, and that relationship going forward for the next 5 years, or for the next year, is going to produce results. You need to have a relationship with the governor. I don't care who it is, and I don't care what party it is. Now, after next year, I'll have 3 years left as your mayor, and I'll work with whoever the governor is. Because governing is different, politics and all of this rhetoric that you hear is different than governing. And when you're about leadership, when you're about vision for the community, you sit at the table and you mold consensus. And I'll work with whoever is sitting in that Capitol I'll work with Republicans, I'll work with Democrats, I'll work with libertarians and no party affiliations, because again, partisan politics is broken. Look at Washington, D.C., look at the bloody mess. And everyone's pointing fingers at everybody else, and the government is shut down. We can't shut down in St. Petersburg. This city is open. We have nowhere to get the can. So you know what? We're forced to get along with it. But it's fun. You know, I am wound up and I get excited. I love this city. I don't care who's up there. We're going to work. Let's get a knee-high guy.
Cody Hogg, and my question goes to Mr. Kriseman. I read that you wanted to promote small business. I was just wondering, is that all industries are small business, only specific ones? And to what extent are you willing to promote it?
To make sure I understood your question. You're saying that...
I'm asking what industries of small business you're willing to promote, if not all of them, and how far you're willing to go to promote them.
No, we are, in some ways, we are a city of small businesses. To me, it's kind of what gives us a little bit of our character. We have tremendous locally owned businesses here, and I really like that. Just look on Central and 6th, for example, and all the small businesses that open there in an area that the recession might hit might not be there, they might not be there. One of the things I think that we haven't done well is focus on small businesses and supporting the businesses that we have here in our community. And throughout this campaign, I've done something I call a small business tour, where I walked into businesses and I asked the business, has anyone from the city ever talked to you about how things are going, what they can do to help you if you have any challenges? And the answer that I routinely get is, I've never seen anybody from the city except one person, codes. They're the only ones I see, and they're telling me what I can't do. And that's a problem. I mean, we have to be focused on bringing new business here, big and small, but we also have to take care of the businesses that we have in our community. And you don't know what their concerns are if you don't reach out to them and ask them and say, what can we do? What impediments as a city are we putting in the way of you being successful? Is there something that we can be doing to help you? If it means we need to make changes to our codes, then we need to look at making changes to codes. But we shouldn't be a city that's all about no. We need to have change in philosophy. We need to be getting and become a city that's yes. How can we make what you need to have happen? What can we do to help you? That's the leadership that I'm going to bring to the city, and I will be focused on small businesses.
Did you just hear what Mr. Kriseman said? Something he did on his campaign tour, he took a tour of small businesses. Where's he been for 6 years? Why hasn't he been touring small businesses in his district? Why hasn't he proposed legislation that created a job? He didn't. So now going forward, and he also talked about something with St. Pete Promise and the campaign trick. And remember, St. Pete's Promise resulted from a new superintendent of schools. I don't pick the timeline. I don't pick when the stars line up, but I do know to take advantage of it when they do. St. Pete's Promise grew out of a new superintendent of schools with a passion. It's not a campaign trick. So when I think about small businesses, I do think about the arts. I think of ways that we can incentivize, even if it's micro grants or things, or maybe some ad valorem abatement, or just something to encourage small businesses. And again, it's arts, it's green, it's high-tech, banking, insurance, financing. It's across the board. But the greenhouse was started to make sure that we create entrepreneurs. We teach them. It's about relationships. It's about networking. This morning, I was at a meeting in the greenhouse called Million Cups of Coffee. I don't know how many of you have heard of that, but it's where young entrepreneurs and startups go in and pitch their ideas. And they get feedback from experts in their field. That's what we're doing in the greenhouse. That's how we're going to grow small businesses. Thank you.
And this will be our last question. Betty Morgenstein, and this is for Mr. Foster. I found a clipping in the St. Pete Times from January 2008. The headline was "Foster links Darwin and Hitler." And in it talks about you're asking the school board, questioning that they should be teaching evolution alone. Do you still believe this, and can you comment on that?
Well, I'm glad you went back to 2008. I wasn't on the city council. I was a private citizen, sitting in my office one day thinking about how there was an attack on, or there was this mindset of education in the schools that's strictly an evolution theory. Now, let me share with you my personal view. I'm a Christian. And some people agree with that, and some people don't. God bless America. So that's kind of not well. But as a Christian, I do believe in the Word of God. I believe that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And I just thought there were so many deficiencies in strictly that Darwin concept that I just thought, and all I was advocating, trust me, I'm not advocating that a teacher in the public schools try to teach the biblical theory of creation or the biblical account of creation, because they'll screw it up. All I was asking for was, you know what, if a child who sees in God we trust on the money, or in God we trust on a building, or you look at all the buildings in Washington and it mentions God, 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 God. If a child has a question, let the child ask the question. Because at the time the debate was, we can't even talk about God in the public schools. But you know what? We talk about God all the time. In the national anthem. And things like that. So there might be some confusion. So all I was advocating was, you know what? If a little kid who sees in God we trust says, okay, I know we came from dinosaurs or gorillas or whatever, but what is this about God? Don't teach it, but just let them ask the question and guide them somewhere where they can get a little help with that. I don't want our kids to be confused. So do I still believe that? Do I think it's a bad thing for a child to utter the word God in school? I don't. I did it all the time.
Thank you. At this time, we'll ask each of our candidates to give their closing remarks.
Well, thank you to Tiger Day members, Mayor Foster, and everyone who asked these great questions, as usual. You know me by now. You know that I spent 6 years serving on the St. Pete City Council, helping to move our community forward during our Renaissance period. And as Mr. Foster has pointed out quite a few times, I did serve 6 years in the Florida House of Representatives. And I'm really proud of my record. I passed some bills that made our community safer, including proposing legislation that had an economic impact. I fought against legislation that would hurt our city. I gave a voice to a lot of people that aren't well represented inside the Capitol. And although it doesn't fit the mayor's narrative, I accomplished quite a bit. During my entire 12 years as a public servant, I have never stopped focusing on policy and the impact that good policy can have on real people. People right here in St. Pete. People want to see a government that works for them. Government which is decisive, proactive, innovative, moving forward, and not just during an election year. That's what's been missing here. Two of the biggest issues that Mr. Foster inherited nearly 4 years ago, the Pier and the Rays, are two of the biggest issues that are still unresolved today. And what progress we have seen occur in St. Petersburg hasn't been because of the efforts of this administration, it's been in spite of this administration. That's not the basis of my candidacy. I'm running to build an economic engine powered by strong public education, good-paying jobs, sound infrastructure and transportation, and safe, vibrant neighborhoods. A city hall which is transparent and responsive to its citizens. In my plan for a better St. Petersburg, I've laid out a positive vision that will help us fulfill our potential. And when I say us, I mean all of us. Downtown, Midtown, South St. Pete, West St. Pete, and up north. St. Petersburg is a great city, but I know we can do better, and I know that we can be better. And I look forward to earning your vote and serving as your next mayor. Thank you all so much.
Well, thank you so much. This was fun. And I know I get a little wound up, I get a little passionate, but you know what? I love the city. I was born and raised here. My parents are here today. My dad, St. Pete High Class of 50. My mom, St. Pete High Class of 55. My grandparents went to St. Pete High. My great-grandparents founded. We're part of the founders of the city. Their names are on Pine Park. This is where I love it. It has been an honor and a joy to be your mayor. And Mr. Kriseman's job, and God bless him, you know, he's got to convince you that the sky is falling. And then we're just status quo, and then things got better in spite of, you know what, that's a bunch of baloney. I don't think there's anyone in here that believes that. We are on a course for greatness. Yes, we can do better. Yes, things will be better. And I'm the only one that's really articulated a vision. You know what? The Rays are going to be a challenge through 2027. You know what? You're always going to have to fight to protect your interest as a taxpayer, to protect your interest in the use agreement, because you're the only ones with skin in the game. You elect this guy, the Rays are gone. So we're not going to give them away. It's been a joy to serve you as your mayor. You know, when I look back and I reflect, there have been some great times, there's been some tragedy, there's been some down times, but I wouldn't change a thing, and I am your mayor. And I want to take a journey with you for the next 4 years. And I ask that you support me on your absentee ballot. You don't have to wait to go home and fill it in today. But as I do reflect on the past 4 years, and I think of my leadership style, I want to tell you something, or give you a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King that kind of sums up where my leadership, just gives you a little insight as to my decision making. On some positions, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But consciousness asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a stand that is neither safe nor politic nor popular. But one must take a stand because it is right. And that's where I find myself today. I have led based upon what I believe to be right. You do know me, and I have taken a stand, whether you agree or disagree. My opponent does not. 6 years in Tallahassee, and all he can say was, I passed some good things, and I defended you from no. You know what we have done. And together, and I thank each and every one of you, together, we come out of this recession. And the wind is in our sails, and the brakes are off. And we're going to move forward. Let's keep going. Support me on November 5th. God bless the Tigers. Thank you.
Mayor Foster, thank you so much for joining us today. Representative Rick Kriseman, we appreciate you coming. I'd like to give you both.
I need my mug.
Carving up a politician mug. We thank you for